a few questions for you.
Okay.
Gillian, I wanted to begin the interview, and I wanted to interview you initially as your classes last year for me were so intriguing and thought-provoking. I thoroughly enjoyed your teaching style, and it made me eager to want to learn more about anthropology. I would like to begin this interview by asking you if you could tell us a little bit about yourself. Do you have any pets at home? And yeah, just a little summary.
Okay, can I ask you first of all, was it the first year lecture in Key Ideas that first encountered me, Jason? And what was it about my teaching style that you liked?
It was how I didn't feel the pressure to every time you spoke, you didn't put the pressure on students to straight away get what you were saying. You completely accepted that it's quite a mind-boggling subject to get your head around, and you made it very easy for us to like for me personally, I didn't have to I didn't feel the pressure I felt in other subjects in terms of your teaching style. I felt quite relaxed. It was a much more comfortable atmosphere. It was much more conversational instead of rigid teaching. And for me as a student, it works a lot better with how I am and what helps me to learn. Okay,
great. That's really nice feedback for me to get to, so that I know what's working. Thank you for the invite to be here today in conversation with you. I'm really glad to be here. So your first question was just wanting to find out a bit more about myself, starting maybe. So I live in London, and I teach in Manchester. So usually during the teaching term, I spend 3 days a week up in Manchester when I'm teaching, and my family life is in London. And you asked me about my pet. I have a black cat called Howl, Howl, as in the anime movie.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, a cat that I adopted from my oldest daughter, Ty. So it's really her cat, and I just kind of take care of him. But he's become like my daemon, because when I go for a walk, he comes everywhere with me. Like, he thinks he's a dog, really. And
oh wow, that's so cool.
So when we go around the block, he comes all the way around the block with us and thinks that he's taking care of me. So he's very cute. He would be a very good cat to make a cartoon about.
I have cats. I've had cats my whole life, so definitely a cat person. Yeah, I've got a nice little grey tabby called Mila.
Oh, nice. What's your cat called?
Mila. So like Milo, but with an A, because she's a girl. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. I would like to also just ask you, how did you initially become interested in the subject of anthropology? Were there any external factors, or was it just out of your own pure interest?
Yeah, there were quite interesting external factors, because I was when I was quite young, I was a fashion model, and I was modeling in Milan in Italy.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I was sharing an apartment with an American young woman, and we were both quite rebellious, and thinking that probably being fashion models was not the best use of our intelligence, but we were having an adventure and trying to make a bit of money for traveling and things. And what happened was, it was, as you can imagine, in those days quite dodgy. So, you know, you sort of, if you weren't prepared to go along with the quite dodgy ethos of fashion modeling in Italy at the time, and we were rebellious and quite intelligent young women anyway, you're going to have quite a difficult time. So we both realized that we didn't really fit in. And I could tell you more about that, but probably in private over a coffee. I'm not sure I should commit it to an interview. There's a bigger story there. Anyway, needless to say, we fled from Milan. And at that time, the fashion industry, don't know whether it still is quite related to the mafia. So we sort of fled for our lives, and because we weren't going to do as we were told anyway. this young woman from America was going to go back to America to study social anthropology.
Oh.
And I had never heard of it. And she said, so I'm getting out of here and I'm going back to America to study social anthropology. And it's a much more popular subject in America than it is in the UK. I had never heard of it. And probably you'll agree with me that it's still not very well publicized as a discipline. It's not easy to find it. So anyway, I came back and I started researching into social anthropology, and within 3 months I was in the School of Oriental and African Studies doing my first year.
Oh wow, that's not the story that I expected.
What were you expecting?
No, I didn't know if you had like an initial interest, like you might have studied it at A levels or.
No, not at all.
Oh wow, no, that's such a cool story.
Yeah, much more interesting.
Yeah, I actually travelled to Milan last summer, just for a weekend. Yeah, I saw the Duomo. It was quite spectacular, and then
wow.
I got the opportunity to meet Berlusconi in the shopping centre. He's
not
like
sure,
one of.
Not sure that officially counts as an opportunity, though.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no, that's very true. But okay, I've also read somewhere that when raising your children, it helped inspire you into the next phase of your life in anthropology.
Yeah, I wonder where you heard that. It's very true. When I was so I took 8 years out of my career to be with my children and to be a full-time mum, and what fascinated me was the process of child development, of how infants and children become who they are. What is the process of learning through which humans become the kinds of humans they are? And so I was so fascinated by that process, you know, the process of human learning in infancy and childhood. It was absolutely intriguing to me. And I very much enjoyed being a full-time mum. Some of the best years of my life, actually, partly because it's so enjoyable, but also because I did find the process of child development fascinating. And so it inspired me to go back to social anthropology, because I was also interested in, I was reading a lot of philosophy about being human and about the human self and consciousness, and I was reading some psychotherapy, especially the work of Carl Jung on the development of the psyche and the self, and all those theories of what it means to be a person, to become human. And I was super interested in those theories, and then also interested in what goes wrong in the development of the human being. You know, if all the conditions for human flourishing are not in place, that's super interesting for me too. So then one of the lecturers that I had at the School of Oriental and African Studies, Christina Torren, had just started a new master's degree in the anthropology of childhood and child development.
Oh, wow.
And it was the first master's degree on that topic in Europe. So it was, you know, cutting edge and kind of ahead of its field. And it wasn't because children are cute. It was because if you're interested in the philosophical, anthropological question of how humans become who they are, which is a fascinating question, it makes sense to study the process of human learning from the very beginning, and to see how our social histories enter into the embodied process of becoming particular kinds of people. So it was just the right master's degree for me. It's had loads of philosophy in it, loads of psychology, loads of anthropology, child development. It was really exciting.
Oh wow, yeah, it sounds absolutely fascinating. You studied that at Brunel, didn't
yes
you?
And then
yeah.
I used the curriculum from that master's degree to develop the third year course that I teach now at Manchester, which is called the Anthropology of Childhood and Education.
Oh wow. Did you enjoy your time at Brunel?
I did, actually. I really enjoyed it. even though I was a mum and I had 2 young children, I'll tell you an interesting story, is that when I started, I was very keen. Obviously, with 2 young children, it's quite difficult to organise my time. So I went to see Christina Torren when the first assignments were due. Don't think she'll mind me saying this. And I said, oh, I'm going to be late. I can't manage, poor me. And I need an extension. And she said, listen, I'm only going to say this once. You need to make a decision about whether you want to get this degree and whether you want to do well. And if you do, you're going to have to get organized. And then she said, one of the foremost anthropologists in the country is Marilyn Strathern, and she has 4 children. She got organized. So she said, I don't ever want you to come here again and tell me you're going to be late with your work. Decide whether you want to stay and step up or drop out now. And nobody had ever spoken to me like that in my life before, have given me that really high expectation. And you know what? From that day, I started getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I learned the value of time. I studied before my kids woke up. And then I was still present to them during the day. And I just got organized and I got a distinction. And it's because the bar was raised so high that I realized what needed to be done if I wanted to make the most of that opportunity. But see, that was an interesting lesson for me. So it meant that I really made the most of the time. And as a mum with young children, I learned the value of time. So even though I had less time than a lot of people, I made the most of the time I had available.
Oh, that's quite. See, I love it when this is why last year with you, you were one of the lecturers that really pushed me in terms of like it kind of like really securing the fact that I wanted to be doing this subject because of how, because every time I walked away from a lecture, I was just kind of like, I was so intrigued. I would go home and just want to learn more. Like even the exorcism lecture was just so mind-blowing, and I went and did so much research on it. And it's just sometimes in life, not because of other people's teaching styles or how they are, but there's just some that get through to you more, and that's what you happen to do for me.
That's great. That's exciting.
What were the motivations behind you? Obviously, clearly you have said, but behind you becoming a lecturer, were there any?
Yeah. So I think, to be honest with you, part of the reason that I became a lecturer and did my PhD is so that I could teach. I was really interested in teaching social anthropology, and I come from a long line of teachers. So I was thinking about this the other day. My mum was a teacher, her mum was a teacher, my dad's mum was a teacher. And so it's kind of in my family, in my blood to teach. And I do love teaching. I don't know if you know this, but I also teach yoga.
Yeah, and silent walking.
Yeah, and so
it's really cool.
Even when I'm teaching yoga, I feel like, I'm kind of in my element. It feels like I'm, they describe what you call a flow state, that when I'm teaching, it also feels, as you said, it's quite a complex subject. And when you've got, 200 young people in front of you, and you've got this job of opening their minds and inspiring them about the subject, and just being, what I enjoy now being a senior lecturer is that I have the confidence now just to stand up and speak, rather than having to rely on my notes, which is a bit distancing somehow. But of course, when you're a junior lecturer, you have to do that. But it's nice to be able to just feel a bit more confident and trust that I know what I'm doing and I can just speak. And then I feel the same when I'm teaching yoga, that what do I have to offer? And all I can offer is my current state of inquiry. What do I find exciting and interesting right now?
So do you do yoga as a pastime quite frequently?
Yeah, I probably practice yoga 4 or 5 times a week myself.
Oh, wow.
At the moment, I teach twice a week.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And the benefits of it, would you say, are quite rewarding?
Benefits of teaching yoga, or just the benefits of practicing yoga?
Partaking, yeah.
Yeah, apart from the obvious things to do with your physical health. I'm most interested in how, in the relationship between the breath and the mind. So that if you can control your breath, you can master your mind. That's the sort of idea.
Okay.
And also, if you can then bring the mind, the breath, and the body within your own control, you can then enter into this conversation with the way, this is going to sound a bit Star Trekky, but you can enter into a conversation where the practice is about the flow of energy, not just in your body, but in the universe.
Okay. Oh, wow. I'm going to push on to, I was going to ask you about your ethnographic monograph, which was based on your PhD.
Yes.
In 2006 on education failure and working class white children in Britain. Yeah. This actually led to quite a national debate about the white working class. And what was your specific motivation behind this interest in this research?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's quite an interesting story again. So originally, I wanted to do my PhD research either in Cuba or Nigeria on the topic of divination. And I couldn't go to Nigeria because the politics was too difficult at the time I was interested in going. Cuba was also quite difficult. So I was just taking a moment to think about what can I do. And we happened to be living on a council estate and in Bermondsey, which is a predominantly white working class area in the Docklands of southeast London. It has quite a hardcore reputation from the past. So, for example, at a certain time, taxi drivers wouldn't take you there. You know, it has a bit of a risky reputation from the Docklands. Now it's quite gentrified and a bit posh. And so I knew that something interesting was happening in the area that I was actually living, on that council estate in Bermondsey. You know, I would, for example, take the girls to school, primary school, and be talking to some of the mums in the playground, and they would be noticing the difference between the different kinds of white working class women bringing their kids into school. So they would be able to identify just by the way they walked, the clothes they wear, but especially the way they wore their jewelry, which part of South London those women came from. And I was thinking, what? I can't differentiate. I have no idea what's happening here. This is a whole social field that I know nothing about. And they treated me like a complete outsider because they thought I was a posh cow and were curious about, you know, what I was doing there. So they were curious about me and kind of taking me under their wing a little bit. But also trying to sort of show me how to read people, how to understand what was going on there. And so I knew that, well, there's something right on my doorstep here that's really interesting. What does it really mean then in England at the turn of the 21st century to be working class in a neighborhood like this, where all the industry is closing down and people seem to be feeling or speaking about how their community was threatened and their way of life was under threat. And there was just a sense of something happening here that was interesting enough and to pique my interest. But then also my partner was super interested in anthropology, but also as a Nigerian man. He was born in Nigeria but raised in London. He was interested in anthropology, but worried that anthropology still had this kind of tinge of colonial framing, that why are the subjects, like the people who are studied, always, in his words, black and brown people? Why are white middle-class anthropologists never studying white people? And so, you know, he sort of said to me, what happened if you studied your own people? That would be a revolution.
Oh, wow.
So, but it hit, it was also right on the money in the sense
Yeah.
that, the decolonization of the discipline, it's an important topic. And so it was an important critique and timely, because it then meant that I focused on something I wouldn't ordinarily have been looking at, that was, and the anthropology of Britain at that time was hardly, it wasn't a mainstream specialization in the subject. And actually, sometimes I would go to seminars and things in mainstream institutions and say that I was doing my fieldwork in Bermondsey, and some of the professors would say that's not anthropology.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly.
Really?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
Yeah, because the idea was that you can't do anthropology at home. By definition, that can't be anthropology. And so it was a good moment for me, because I was also at the School of Oriental and African Studies, also very rebellious there too, very critical about anthropology, that I found it often quite boring until the writing culture revolution came along, where we had to start, really being political about the discipline. And I loved all of that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, because that really interested me, because I know a lot of studies at the time were done abroad, and there weren't a lot done in Britain at all. And so I was quite I wanted to know the background of that. How would you say the discipline of anthropology speaks to wider social sciences and disciplines?
Yeah, I think there's a lot more room for interdisciplinary conversation, even at Manchester, for example. I mean, you guys are lucky doing the BAS program, I think, because you guys get to, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you guys get a taste of the different disciplines, or at least a range of disciplines, and then you get to specialize a bit more as you go through the degree.
Yeah.
So you're probably already yourself seeing that, oh, this is sociology, or this is politics or philosophy, and here's anthropology. How do they speak to each other? So you're already crafting that conversation. Whereas for me, I find it quite frustrating. And I'd like to do more about this, but I find it quite frustrating that, so for example, one of my research specialisms is social class in Britain, or Brexit in Britain, these kinds of things, but I'm not having conversations with anyone in the sociology department who's also focusing on social class in Britain, or multiculturalism in Britain, or anyone in the politics department focusing on Brexit. I think there's a lot more room for interdisciplinary conversation, because once you're doing the anthropology of Britain, then what you'd want really is an interdisciplinary approach to that topic, because so many people in different disciplines are focusing on Britain. So there could be something really exciting.
Yeah, I agree. That would be really exciting. In speaking about the Brexit Britain paper and the Windrush scandal and the power of protest, in relation to you speaking in that paper about authoritarianism and us rising up in response as a human instinct, how does the proposed British Bill of Rights make you feel, and also the Policing Act of 2022, which took away some of our freedoms to protest in a very scary way, make you feel?
Great question, Jason. So you've obviously done your research well. So when the Windrush scandal kind of first came to public attention, my younger daughter and I organised a T-shirt campaign, and my daughter commissioned an artist to produce this fantastic protest art to put on the T-shirt, and then we sold the T-shirts online, and then people started posting them on Instagram. So I think that Instagram account is still there, where you can see a whole range of people, including quite a few famous people in the world of entertainment, who got behind the campaign, wore the T-shirts, and then put themselves on Instagram to raise attention about what was happening, that people who ought to have been treated as treasures of the nation were being threatened with insecurity and even deportation, and really made to feel insecure in a place that they had been really fundamental to building, you know, the country. And so we were outraged, and we just had a go, you know, because I remember my daughter saying, what can I do? I'm just one person. And I saying, well, we could have a go. Let's have a go at doing something. And the important thing is that in having a go at protesting, you learn.
Yeah.
You learn a huge amount about what works and what doesn't. And then you learn a lot about British politics and how it works. So having organised that campaign quite successfully, and then being involved in some of the street marches, so we were at the forefront of some of those street marches in the early days, and our pictures were on the front of the Guardian newspaper and things. If that happened this year, we'd be arrested.
Yeah.
So, you know, then, you know, the stakes are higher. Are you ready to go to prison? Are you ready to jeopardize your own situation in order to make those protests? So it's harder to protest and to learn about protesting without undertaking too great a risk now than it was. And what I resent is that that's wrong. And also I resent that Bill of Rights, I feel, was sneaked in when everybody was focusing on COVID.
Yeah, I agree.
And so there's so much happening that's so wrong. And I think what I've tried to do is keep track of British politics and how the centre ground is slowly moving towards the right in ways that we all need to be much more aware of. And that it's not just happening in Britain, it's happening, you know, in Europe and elsewhere around the world, as the form of nationalism is transforming into a frightening version of xenophobic exclusion, where cultural politics is becoming the norm. You know, there's so much more I could say about that, but I feel that anthropology has something unique to contribute to the study of politics and protest in the UK, and especially with what we can do to excavate the deep currents in our history that lead to contemporary uprisings or contemporary changes that we need to keep our eye on.
Yeah. I mean, me personally, as a young person interested in politics myself, and raised in this country, which came to be, you know, like a symbol of democracy. And in recent times, I'm seeing more and more kind of hindering of that, and it's quite scary for a young person, of what's been going on. Like, the Human Rights Act was such a monumental act that was passed, and that gave everyone on an equal basis human rights. And to know that this is going to be repealed and replaced is quite scary, just because we want sovereignty of our courts and stuff. So I definitely agree that we are moving into a new era of politics, as you can see in the recent Italian elections as well.
Exactly.
Which is quite scary. I mean, yes, for someone with my opinion, and for young people around the world, and something in Iran right now, which is happening, which is horrific, but also inspiring, because a nation is standing up to an authoritarian figure. But I can't help but feel like we're in such a desperate place right now in this world, where if we don't stand up soon, especially in this country, we're going to end up being, I mean, walked all over in a sense. And
yeah, I think what I call it is creeping authoritarianism, that we have to just be careful about how some of the fundamental democratic freedoms that we've taken for granted are in jeopardy, and not just in the UK, but America, Europe, and elsewhere. So yeah, you're right on the money, Jason.
Thank you. Before I would like to end this, I would want to ask, are there any recent publications by any anthropologists at the moment that you would like to promote?
Any recent publications by anthropologists? I think that the publication of my own, I don't want to be self-promoting here, but I was kind of expecting to have to talk about one of my own publications, so I'll just do that, because
Yeah,
that's what I was going to be, was a publication that's come out of the most recent work on a project that Katie, myself and Professor Jeanette Edwards and some others were involved in, where we were focusing on Brexit in Britain. And the title of the paper is "Brexit is the Graveyard of Post-Industrial Britain."
Okay.
And another paper before that is an even easier to understand, easy to read paper that I was asked to write to explain Brexit to an American audience. And it's called Brexit Britain, Why We Are All Post-Industrial Now. And it's just everyday language. You could give it to anybody to read and then discuss in the pub. And that's the kind of anthropology I really like. Maybe we could set up a discussion group about a paper that's easy to read in anthropology. That's the kind of thing I'm sort of, excited to do.
Okay, cool. Finally, do you speak any, this is completely off topic and just a fun question, do you speak any other languages?
I speak French nearly fluently, and I'm currently learning Italian.
Oh wow, that's incredible. How are you getting along?
Well, I love Italian because I just love the musicality of it, so it's not difficult to learn, and I sometimes dream in Italian after I've had my Italian lesson, because it's like my whole being just says yes to it. Maybe I was Italian in a past life. What about you, Jason? Do you speak any other languages?
No, so I am actually half Armenian and quarter Czech and quarter English. So I speak a bit of Czech and Armenian, not fluently, but if I went there, I could get by, as they say. But yeah, my Armenian history is actually why I am really interested in social injustices and just massive social issues on a whole, and genocide, of course. But I guess for me, it's meant that I've been wanting to come to uni and push boundaries and find out more stuff, because I know I was in secondary school in year 10, and I went to my history teacher and I said, why don't I get to learn about my own history? Why am I never taught about stuff that matters to me? Like, why am I taught about British colonialism? And like, so that inspired my history teacher to do a whole assembly on us learning about our individual histories, and we got to come in and choose our history lessons for a month. So
that's so inspiring.
Yeah, I do feel it's really important in this country that we start to study what's important instead of what is in our curriculum, because we don't actually learn anything accurate about what this country has done as a whole.
Yeah, I agree with you that there needs to be a even more wholesale revolution in the teaching of the history of the British Empire and who the British really are, and what that means for the fact of, well, that we all occupy an empire state of mind, whether we like it or not, and we have to come to terms with what that really means for us, rather than trying to pretend it's not true. Yeah, no,
totally.
Great.
Well, thank you so much today, Gillian. That was such an exciting conversation. I've been really looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it too. And I'm on sabbatical at the moment, but in the second semester, I'll be back in Manchester. So if you want to take me up on the idea of a student discussion about reading one of my easy to read papers, I'm really happy to follow up on that. And if not, I'll just meet you for a coffee, Jason, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, please. That would be incredible. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Really nice to meet you. Thank you.
Really nice speaking to you today.
Yeah, take care and keep going.
Thank you.